Many people on YouTube have done a video, usually concerning this topic. I feel like they do an okay job, but I don't think they've fully reached the bounds as of now, that have really effectively covered the topic and all that. And then when it kind of gets into the further, discussions and everything, I feel like people just, I wouldn't say they get too far ahead of themselves, but when they start pushing it further and further along the trail, it starts getting a little bit looser and all that. So I've been sitting and thinking about, based on listening to the other videos and all that, European Canadian, Fly Daily, some of those are larger community members that have really thought of looking ahead kind of things. One of the things that really came to mind and all that, I'll talk about this morning. So when I woke up this morning, I pulled out my laptop and I basically wanted to see how the F-100D video, the intercept mission that I had with the Ace Combat playback, or not say playback, but play over on the side, doing the audio and everything. I thought it was kind of cool and all that for a little piece of non-editing, that I was able to pull something off like that. It was simplistic, yet it kind of worked. Would I have done things a little bit differently with it? Yeah, I would have. I didn't practice the timings very often. I thought, that there's something there that could be clever and quick and probably could get that going right off the deck. But it sounded really cool. And some of the timings in it were kind of neat to see. Sometimes where you have the audio from the video, missile would fly off the rack, but that's beyond the point. One of the things that I was thinking was, I thought the F-100D would obviously have to be a choice to be added to the game. Obviously the guns, I'm pretty sure the F2 guns and the F-100D's guns are the same. I could be wrong. I haven't really dipped into it. Obviously it had the same audio, so I would assume it was the same guns. It's not a unsafe assumption in this case, but one of the things that really came to my mind was this morning, as one of the suggested videos off the 100, the intercept mission, it wasn't in English, it was Russian. There was a video with a MiG-19 model. Obviously, I was like, oh, this is completely new and everything. I mean, people might have known about this, but I didn't. But there was a MiG-19 model out there, and only videos that I saw, that I was willing to dig into it, were made by a Russian, or the video was recorded by a Russian. But the MiG-19 was pretty well modeled. I'd say it was even more modeled. I mean, not really in the cockpit sense. The cockpit was, on the F-100D, was Russian. When I looked at it, I was like, okay, obviously someone nipped this from somewhere. But one of the things that I saw with the MiG-19 was, yes, be it the cockpit model wasn't fully done, but the externals on it, I mean, I'll try and link the video in the description. If I don't remember it, I'll have to watch the video and I'll probably throw it in the editing. But in the video I was watching, all these, these minor movements within the aircraft with, the little, obviously the opening and the closing of the cockpit is a main, function feature within the aircraft. A lot of stuff starts moving. You get ladders to come out sometimes out of aircraft. You see the cockpit come back. You have some, specialized compartments open up, and that's basically what was going on the MiG-19. Obviously I didn't have a ladder, but the whole thing that I saw with it was, the external model could be considered good enough. And when I say good enough, I'm usually speaking in the sense that, like the Hinkle 177 model when it was a user-made mission, within, I don't know if it was a month of it coming out, Hinkle 177 is announced. And this is no, like, new thing for War Thunder. What was it? When the Avro Vulcan model was produced, a lot of people got hyped when they played that mission. You know, you had Flight Ailey, he was just looking at it, he's like, the bomb load was something unseen. Like, it could dwarf the Tupla 4's capacity to bomb targets. That, for a lot of people, is a little bit hard to grasp. You know, I didn't know what to say when I saw it. I was like, where do you put this thing BR-wise? Because you almost have to put it at 10.0, considering its bomb load. And the speed was very much the verge of dealing with the Sabres in their top speed realm. So this is like no laughing joke, and looking back on it, I probably would agree with some of the community and all that. There was like two bits of the community, because Gaijin actually thought that it would be worth a shot to add it. And there was a complete eruption of people that said, no, you can't do this, because there were two main factors that they were worried about. One was the top speed of the aircraft and its altitude performance, because obviously bombers, if they can't shoot to defend themselves, or they're inferior to their dogfighting opponents, they're not going to fight an engagement. No sane person would ever do that. I mean, tactically you could, you know, try and force overshoots, but in a bomber like that and at size, risking an engagement would be futile. So it would be completely understandable for the pilots to immediately go for speed or go for altitude, and that's exactly what the Canberra pilots do, or even some of the, you know, Russian bombers. I haven't really seen Arado 234s do it, but I'm sure they do it. Well, they go and climb, and the match turns from a 7-minute sweep to a 20-minute hunt. Not many people like that. So I think it was understandable that Gaijin did not go through with the Avro Vulcan as of now. As of now, 2018, the 10th of June. I'm sure that will change in the future, because it's going to change in the future. One of the bigger things that I have seen with this game is the user-made missions. The moment they come out, the debate immediately comes to the forums and the developers of, this aircraft's in the game. I mean, albeit it's a user-made mission, but you can download the model. Can it be applied within the game? Hinkle 177 said yes. Avro Vulcan said no. Then you have two aircraft, the MiG-19 and the F-100D Super Sabre. Two aircraft, in my opinion, relatively have performance or capabilities that I think could be matchable at a 10.0 battle rating. And one of the biggest things I've been advocating was, back when the Hawker Hunter was what it was as its glory days, because currently right now it's at its lowest point, I'd probably say. The Hawker Hunter was pretty much the dominant force within a game. The amount of Hawker Hunters you had usually determined the outcome of the game, or the quality of your pilots. And I would know, because usually I'd be sitting there with a two-man ship of hunters. We'd scream right in and bag 8 kills between us. It was not something that's unheard of. I mean, in my opinion, I thought it was a necessary part of the game to see the fact that an aircraft usually had to carry your team. You know, it was the perfect aircraft for the job. It had high speed, incredible climb performance. It was necessary in the sense that it needed the guns and performance that it did in order to deal with the Tupolev bombers back when the Tu-4 crisis was at its peak during the 8.0 move. Something had to stop the plane. Nothing was better than the Hawker Hunter. It was designed to encounter the Tupolev 4. It was one of those design meets reality. Or meets reality. But one of the big things with this game is these debates come up regarding the aircraft. You know, there's strong, pushes for it. Fly Daily is one of the big pushers. Obviously, he's got a large follower base. You have European Canadian as well. He's a very much more technical kind of guy. I'd probably even talk a video about these guys and how much what they bring to the War Thunder community. It's really quite impressive. But one of the things that they've been both calling for, and I've been calling for as well, and a lot of the people I fly with, has been a rank 6 addition to the air branch or the air arm in some cases for these nations. Obviously there are issues with it. That's the reason why it's been not pushed, so to say. But I think to say these points could be clarified as to why. And it could be an outside perspective, but I feel like one is always needed in some cases. The thing that I have been saying regarding, as of today, is the MiG-19 and the F-100D, or F-100, whatever model they decide to put in. They both could be implemented without missiles being added to the game. Obviously there are issues with that. There's a depletion within the other nations, and most of all, as the current format, because Germany has been removed at capacity to fly alongside Russia, the Warsaw Pact genre of fighting has been eliminated as of now. Germany will fight Russia and the United States combined. If the F-100 and the MiG-19 were added, that would be completely devastating to the balance that it is. I mean, even though the balance is in Germany's favor currently, it would be totally devastating for Germany. Obviously, I could say that the pilots in the German aircraft could make it work. I think they could. But obviously we know where the crowd rolls. They roll where the momentum is, and that's the case with a lot of stuff. We could see that with the, let's see. There's a couple of great examples of that. Trying to think about it off the top of my head. This bit was kind of like one of those obvious. Yes, so the Lavochkin 200. The Lavochkin 200, when it was added, it racked up an incredible pilot base to fly it. I remember flying my Hawker Hunter and or even my F-86 F2, and I just saw entire teams filled with them, and I thought, no way this plane is that good that people would love it that much. I mean, it's completely insane. You're having an aircraft that has an unbelievable capacity to hit its aircraft. It's using 37mm cannons, 3 of them. Obviously, it's one of the biggest, heaviest armaments being slung around the battlefield at its BR at that. But there was such a huge hype. But if you look now, no one's flying Lavochkin 200s. Hardly anyone. Sorry about that. Hardly anyone's flying Lavochkin 200s. You'll probably see one a match. Probably one a day. If you're lucky. but there's hardly anyone flying them. That hype died down. Now it could be to the Canon crisis right now. We're kind of in Canon Armageddon. Basically everything that's 20 mil and up has been effectively faulted in its performance. The 50 cal is currently reigning supreme. I don't have a terribly big issue with a 50 cal being capable, but I feel like the Canon should be just as, if not more. I think it's insulting that 30 mils and 20 mils, scrape the paint off a plane. When 50 cals are stripping the wings off some of them. They had a video on the Discord. I'll probably look at linking it to the YouTube videos, but one of the things was in the videos of the Discord, guy posts the Hawker Hunter, I think it was Hunting Tiger. Let me look at the video quick. Is it Hunting Tiger? Must be in the Dinkus to Memes chat. Epic Blitzkrieg 87. Guy actually I have flown with and actually talked with before I even knew he had a YouTube. But yeah, he's got a couple of videos out there where the Hawker Hunter is going in head-on pass, or it's got a good side pass approaching an Al-28, and every time I see one of those passes, I'm like, that plane's going to be decimated, because that's how used to the gun camera, or, I mean, not the gun camera, but obviously from firing from the Hawker Hunter's perspective for so long, just seeing an aircraft in its position and knowing the cannons where they're going to land, you just know that plane's dead. But every time, from the video montage that he had, aircraft walked away. They walked away almost as if they had just been, hit by a light hailstorm. It was something that was not to be worried about. And that's just unacceptable. They are trying to fix it. I'm just afraid that when they try to fix it, it's just going to be catastrophic in its element. But, back to the whole major fact with rank 6. The issue with the the F100 Century Series Sabre and the MiG-19 being added was somewhat a similar issue, but I wouldn't say it's an incredibly vast issue if related to the 9.0 transition. I mean, one of the best examples of this, this has been brought up in the Discord, because I always enjoy the Discord for the debates that can be brought up sometimes. Sometimes there's a good debate to be seen. Sometimes it's just idiots talking. But one of the points that I put forward relates to the Japan tech tree. This applies in many cases to a couple countries. I'd probably say Italy, Germany, Japan fall under this umbrella. And I say this is the reason why. Before the F-40 Sabre, that's all you had, aircraft-wise. That's the only 8.0, that's the only 9.0, 7.0s. This used to be a 7.0. They moved to 7.3. I don't know why. R2Y2s, I don't think very many people are really going to be flying them. But the F-30 Sabre was the peak of the performance in Japan. And that was my first 9.0 jet, and I spent a long time trying to balance out the kill record on it because, I never experienced 9.0. I never had the 8.0 introduction. This was a jet that I was taught that you have to forget everything you know about aerorealistic flying. And that's something that I think you could apply to a couple tiers in War Thunder. Probably rank 4 or rank 5 cover that perfectly. Rank 4 logic is completely out the window. Rank 5 logic goes out the window even further. Probably goes into the neighbor's house. But the situation that's between this was the kick at 6.7 went from a 6.7 to a 9.0. That's a massive jump in BR terms. You know, I can only compare it probably to no, that's not what I want. Probably to tank terms. With the Crusader AA Mark 1 jumping to the Falcon. You know, it's an insane gap. That shoes need to be filled. Nothing's there to fill it though. Because that's the story with the Japanese nation of aircraft. They were transitioned. This right here is the American transition. The post-war Japan. Supplied by its, you know, its former adversary. Because, obviously, that adversary has invested in the country. And with that being said, that gap is tremendous. And as a player coming into the nation, I was like, look at that. I only have to go through one jet to get the F-86 F-30. That's one of the quickest ways to get a jet. Or a 9.0. That's incredible. And I'm probably going to look through the other nations. Italy doesn't have 9.0s, but, I mean, getting a jet there is not going to be very hard. You know, immediately you go right to your top tier of your nation. Let's see what France. I think France. Germany's another example with the MiG-15 bis. Not so much the CL-13. That's kind of what the aim of some players is. They want something to fill the gaps. 8.0, 9.0. I mean, 8.0, 9.0 is relatively. I mean, this is going to be filled in though with the new patch 1.79. They're going to add a French F-84 because you know we needed more F-84s. But in this case, it's going to help the French tech tree out by giving it some meat. But like I said, with Germany's tech tree, this is another case and example. My first MiG was through the German. You know, went straight through the Hinkel 162 and got the MiG-15 bis. That's the way it played. You know, people want... I mean, I don't think they want it to the extent like this. They probably want one or two planes separating their first jet within that line to the final goal jet. But the point in case has to be made that, you know, people want something to fly in between. You know, the jump can be a bit hard on people, and I agree with that, with the jump being hard. The Kika to the F-86 F-30, there were skills that the Kika brought to the F-30 that, you know, I could carry on, but it was completely a different experience. You couldn't turn the same, you can't gun lead the same. Your positioning altitude-wise is completely indifferent. The Kika, you know, is a traditional, I need altitude in order to gain security. The F-86 the F-86 series, you know, and the other jets, like the MiG-17, speed is their security. Energy is their security. Altitude can be converted out of the energy category. Energy is just the rough term to speak in either side of high speed or high altitude. You know, those energy states are both, I wouldn't say, I'd say not proportional, but they can be ratioed and set to a point where it's almost a circle of energy and balance. You know, you can only be at a low point when you're at a low point for both of them. But with that, this jump is something that's an issue, and that applies to many nations, and it's kind of the Japan case and the Germany case of issues. So if we were to speak in the sense of, let's look at the other nations, let's just say for 1 minute, the F-100 and the MiG-19 are added to the game. But on top of that, there's more added to the game. We see stuff for, say, America right here. Let's say the Furies here, you know, that's added and everything. But maybe we add the A6 Intruder. Maybe we add the Crusader for the Navy. Maybe we add, obviously the F-100D would be here. Maybe we add beyond that the F-104. Because then when you add the F-104, everything changes. The Crusader actually could even be equipped with France, I believe. I think France actually used the Crusaders. But one of the things with the F-104 is we start running into the Saber issue. And I mean by the Saber issue as in America has a Saber, Germany has a Saber, Japan has a Saber. Except F-104 takes it to a whole new level. I don't know about Italy, but I know Japan had an F-104, Germany had an F-104, America had an F-104, Italy, and I don't know about France particularly. France, actually no, France probably did have it. I know Belgium had it. I know Canada used the F-104. That could be an argument for perhaps Britain. I wouldn't say that's a great idea, but you know, we say, hey, with the F-104, there's a large thing set, because at this point in history, this is where things become dangerous. You start seeing mass suppliers of aircraft, and what I mean by the issue of mass suppliers is 1950 to 1960, the diversity in aircraft of mass supplying is very low. America is a superpower when it comes to aircraft selling or supplying for its, I don't say just customers, but allies. That's one of the bigger things. You start seeing nations or NATO, the NATO standard F-104 show up. Beyond that, we could even probably say with the F-4 Phantom. The F-4 Phantom is definitely something that goes a long ways. I know the United States obviously had the F-4 Phantom, they developed it. I'm pretty sure Germany had the F-4 Phantom. I could be wrong there. I know they had the F-104, that was the Wittenmacher. Russia obviously wasn't with NATO, but I think Britain did have some F-4 Phantoms. But I think they used it more in a training sense than anything else. They might have used it in a limited role, but I really doubt it. Japan definitely had the F-4 Phantom. F-4 Phantom is one of the... It's actually still in service with the Japanese Air Force. I mean, later models, obviously, but Italy had the F-4 Phantom, and I think even France probably had the F-4 Phantom. But I could be wrong there again. Like I said, this is coming in with little... This is, you know, some out-player knowledge. You know, some of the stuff I've read, some of the stuff I've basically gone in and said, you know, based on these countries having it, usually the other country picks it up. But at the same time, you know, during the 60s, there was development of other aircraft, such as, you know, I don't know if the Tornado series was being developed during the 60s. It could have been. But one of the bigger things I thought for Britain, you know, we have the Hawker Hunter F1. What's stopping them from adding the Hawker Hunter F4 model to the game? Obviously, with the F4 model, you would get, you know, a slight improvement in engine power. You know, obviously, you can't model reliability in this game. The reliability of the F1 was not very good. Historically, it wasn't exactly a great aircraft. The guns had trouble. You could watch an entire documentary on the F1, or not the F1, but the Hawker Hunter, and see the F1 in its stages. But what the F4 brings to the table is actually incredibly helpful. To put it in perspective with the Hawker Hunter F4, think of the Hawker Hunter, but it gets the payload capacity somewhere in the ballpark of the Vautour series of jet. You start seeing the capacity of hard points on the wings of the F4. That's what the Hawker Hunter F4, we're not talking about the Phantom, this is two different aircraft. The Hawker Hunter F4 hard points on the wings. And obviously it had air-to-air missiles. That could be a platform generation for the British, where missiles are introduced. There are other aircraft that could obviously be spurred in there. I think at that point, the Meteor Mark IV series can be foldered. I don't think there's very much reason why the Meteor series should be out the way it is. It's literally an F and a G model difference. I've seen aircraft with less similar names be foldered. So there's that for Britain. I think Britain has the potential to grow here, to probably get some atmosphere back. I think Britain's been screwed over a lot lately, you know. Looking at its army and aviation, Britain has been very much abused by the other nations. It is inferior. I'd probably say it's inferior to that of Russia, Germany, United States. After this patch, I'm ready to say Japan, and probably wouldn't go as far to say France, but France could be a wild card. It's hard to say how the the AMX 40 is going to play out, but I see a lot of potential there. I see Japan's Type 90 as being one of the most fearsome fighters on the battlefield, and I do agree Japan did deserve something, but I don't believe it deserves something as far as 540 mils of penetration, but that's another topic. It's more of a dub blog than anything else, but there's potential for Britain there. Obviously, like we said with the Russians, they'd have the MiG-19. They even probably have the potential for the MiG-21. I'd be up for that debate. I think it might be warranted. If air-to-air missiles go through, I think the MiG-21 would have its seat at the table. Although I think if the MiG-21 was added, the F-4 Phantom would have to be added. It would just be too insulting. But I think with even France, we could even probably say take a look at the early Mirage. The Mirage would be very interesting to see. And it could probably be, you could probably get away with it in this game, considering the fact that that's a viable aircraft, and relative to the time period, it would work. But you could probably even see, I mean, I don't want to say we're going to rank 7. That would be completely out of left field. But, you know, rank 6 premiums being Israeli, you know, modeled Neshers and Mirages. But that's, like I said, that's left field. We're not going to consider that. But that's kind of the McGeck kind of mindset. Something that, you know, that's another thing for Britain. That's another topic again. But obviously with the rank 6 introduction, you know, you can move some of the aircraft from rank 5 up, but, you know, like some nations like France, you know, you only have 6 jets here. You know, that it would work in some cases for nations like the United States and Britain and even Russia. Well, Russia could work. You could probably get away with Russia, but America is one of those big nations where you can say, yep, move it on. Britain, go ahead and move it on. Yeah, Britain would be one of those nations you could get away with. Germany, you could probably get away with that with Germany, but there's issues when it comes to the fact that the standard being set by the ground forces, basically saying 9.3 and 9.7 are a battle rating to be considered, kind of opens the mind to the idea that 9.0 was never the limit. There's a lot more to go, and I'm curious to see if we'll ever breach the 10.0 thing. I think we will. I just don't think we'll see it probably within this year. I could be wrong, though. That would be an awesome thing to be wrong about. I wish I could think of some other stuff. Obviously, I think there's some growth for Britain in this. Britain's jets in the 1950s, late 1950s, were really, I mean, the F-1 doesn't do Britain justice for how much aircraft development they were doing by themselves. Avro, I don't know, the Supermarine was probably still going for it. Hawker, obviously. You know, many of the aircraft industries within Britain that had been turned out during the war of World War II, you know, really started coming into their peak when it came to radical design and capacity. You know, the Hawker Hunter for the time period that it was introduced, was just a revolution. There was the modern fighter jet was basically being sought out by this concept. You know, the intakes were relatively in a position aft of the pilot. It wasn't the mouth-breathing engine that you would see in the front, so infamous with the MiGs and the Sabres, which would continue up through the late 50s into the 60s. You know, those things basically stopped for obvious reasons. They just needed more speed, and that was not an efficient way of producing it. But I like to see that transition in the tech trees if we ever see it. But like I said, I think the major factors would be MiG-19, F-100, F-104. I would love to see the F-102 in this game. Seeing the F-102, and I think that could even be added in the sense for a continuation off the Canberras. Not the Canberras, sorry, the B-57s for the United States. You know, we could bring bombing. I mean, obviously you could do it off the Sky Knight. That's a possibility. The only issue with that, I'd probably say, is this is more of a carrier-based realm of aircraft. The attackers obviously not all being, you know, carrier-based, but that's kind of the attitude that's kind of transitioning here, was the carrier-based strike package ability, even though these are technically in that category as well, but they consider them more fighters. But that's injustice, in my opinion, for the United States. But we probably could see the F-102 continue off the Canberras. There's a possibility there. People shatter to think, or they jump out of their chair in an exhilarated feeling when the idea of a B-52 is mentioned, or a B-36. I think you could get away with the B. I always thought the B-36 could always have this slot here, and be the opposite to the Tu-4 at 8.0. I feel like that's a reasonable thing that could be, you know, gotten away with. It has, you know, adequate defenses, and it has adequate capability. I think it would have a place in this game. I think they're just afraid. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of cases in this game. It's almost kind of like the Supreme Court, or the court system. I mean, relative to the United States. You know, that's one of the things that's considered is, has there been a case before, you know, that proves that this concept is viable? The B-36 is legitimized with the BV-238. 6 engines are possible. The case is proven. So it's one of those things that's usually had to be kept in mind. Personally, like I said, I would like to see the, in my opinion, I think it would do best for the game. This whole rut that we've been in for the last, since January. I mean, the patch never went up in January, it went up in February, but this whole rut that we've been in with the tanks has just been absurd. You know, we're seeing different models of tanks. We're seeing another Leopard 2 being added. Obviously, this is a more realistic Leopard 2. Like I said, this is another conversation, but the, I don't want to say idiocracy, but it's ludicrousy. You know, all these nations just getting tanks left and right. Obviously, Britain's kind of getting shortchanged, like I said. I mean, it's a little bit, you know, insulting, but nations have been screwed over before in this game. But so much to be added. It's just, you know, what are we gonna, when are we gonna see the air develop? And in my opinion, the reason why we have to have the air develop is in order to help balance out the ground realistic battles. This is an element not only for air realistic, but for ground forces. And I speak for that case being because radar guarded AAA has been causing havoc. Certainly people have adapted to the fact that AAA with radar is extremely accurate. It is fine to the point. You know, a lot of people would, including myself, would even say it's easy mode when it comes to bringing it to the battlefield. You literally can identify your opponent. You actually can physically identify your opponent through the game. I mean, I think I've done it in some streams where I've operated, I might have operated the Shulka and actually showed it, but, you know, selecting the target and then, you know, calling out through the the I don't know what you call it, you know, the in-game call-out system or in-game command system. You know, I'm attacking this guy. The radar will actually identify the aircraft. It'll say, hey, such and such is an AD-4. I'm going to be attacking him. That's incredible. Not only have you, you know, deduced the ability to shoot the opponent down, but you've been able to identify the aircraft through the in-game system. You know, that's insane. You're effectively your own you're effectively your own observing post for air observation. I mean, not from the air perspective, but you can identify the aircraft and greatly aid your team in information. You know, that's something that's not seen in all that, but that's one of the repercussions that comes alongside the development of something. I mean, I don't think anyone was really calling out for radar-guided AAA. I never looked at the forums for this stuff, but you know, the moment radar-guided AAA was added, ground forces was changed forever. No longer would you see pilots get away with a low fast pass on a target. You know, that usually was admired out of pilots, was their ability to, you know, sneak behind under the radar, or under, not the radar, but under the observation of the enemy, because and escape their controls or their firing skills, I'd say. That's probably the best way to put it, but that was something that was admired, was you saw someone, and if you got caught by a AAA and they didn't, back when they didn't have radar, it was kind of like, yep, he got lucky, he got me, or he actually knew what he was doing, he was set up perfectly, I didn't, you know, read the situation to the fullest, I rushed in, you know, I saw a situation, I had to, you know, many arguments, many excuses could be made, but the moment radar-guided AAA came in, you know, people are pulling radar through hills. That's not how radar works. You know, radar should be modeled in a way that doesn't say nearest guy to me is automatically painted and the lead indicators being handed to me. That stuff's just absurd. And one of the biggest things that I'm happy about in this patch coming up, 1.79, is the Fritz-X guided bomb. And why I'm saying that is, now we're seeing the introduction of smart weapons. We're starting to see weapons that can be guided from miles away. Obviously this is an issue, but, you know, I wouldn't want to pull a statement from World of Tanks, but you shouldn't stand still. You know, otherwise they're going to get you. Obviously that never could be applied in World of Tanks, you know, regarding artillery, because, you know, artillery was ridiculous, but, you know, the Fritz-X only has a limited traverse path. It's purely designed for you to drop it in the realm of the target, and that realm is less than 50 meters. That's hardly far at all. A tank could easily cross 50 meters in no time. Not if you're a mouse, but you open a can of worms for yourself, and even at that point, probably conventional bombing would get you. But the larger fact is, with these bombs being implemented, we've opened the door to the idea that radar-guided AAA vehicles can be countered. Not just in the sense that they can attack their primary targets, which are the ground vehicles themselves, you know, the players that are trying to take points or kill your friendlies, but the sense that we would be able to see radar be countered as itself. I mean, one of the things I've always been calling for lately has been the HARM missile. Obviously the HARM missile was developed for the Vietnam War to counter the North Vietnamese radar packages, and, you know, it was obviously being also developed as the long spring for the Cold War if it got hot with Russia or the USSR. You know, anti-radar missiles or anti-radiation missiles. There's a reason why they developed them. Obviously it was more for SAMs, than it was for the radar guided AAA guns, but the principle still applies. It's a radar. It works on the same function and principality, it just worked for a different gun. And not to say SAMs aren't going to be introduced, because they are being planned. You know, the British are planning on getting the Rapier missile system. That's an incredible anti-air package. One of the sad things I have to say, though, is the reason why they're being developed is incorrect completely. People are saying that this is going to counter helicopters. Yes, they will be able to counter helicopters. They'll be able to counter them quite well. But the moment you give someone the ability to bring a missile package, they've greatly increased the range of their ability. And the problem with this ties in with the maps. If you look at the consistency of a map size for the ground forces to the air that the area that the air has to cover. If we were to statistically look at this between, let's say, we'll take two maps, Maginot Line versus Karelia. Karelia being one of the high tier death traps for so many nations. You walk out of your spawn, you instantly can get killed. It's that quick of a encounter with the enemy. You know, it's a complete insult that it's at the BR that it is. No one's ever stopped to try and counter that, you know, within the system. You know, people have taken it as a, you know, a keepsake. It's there for me to pick off the early kill in the match and guarantee me some spawn points. You know, I'll do my stuff there. But the reason why the radar-guided AAA guns do as well as they have on Karelia versus, say, Maginot Line, I mean, there's obviously some other factors we have to look into, but I think if you look at the kill counts, Karelia is a graveyard versus Maginot Line when it comes to air. I think Karelia takes up probably, trying to think, probably easily 1/10 of Maginot's map space. Easily 1/10. Probably even smaller than that. Probably 1/11th, 1/12th. I'd probably even go as far to say. But to see something of that capacity, radar guided AAA. This is radar guided AAA we're talking about. You know, the direction on Karelia is much more predictable. The concentration of the airspace is going to be a lot more intense. Aircraft are trying to drop their payloads. Aircraft are trying to engage other aircraft. That's realistic. What's not realistic, though, is someone fighting within a quarter-mile space with an entire, you know, army clashing within a quarter-mile. That's ridiculous. If we were to look at the Cold War, you know, strategy, entire armies would probably be stretched at least 2 miles. At least. In engaging their opponent. Just to get the effectiveness of countering their opponent either with numbers or coverage. You don't see that in ground RB. And that's one of the issues that we have to see. Obviously, you know, this is technological points being put forward and all that, but the smart weapons are needed. Obviously, if we were to flip the coin, though, on Karelia and say, you know, here's the smart weapons package, where are the ground forces going to be hiding? You know, there's a very small area that you have to look for your opponent. In my opinion, though, I think I'd take Maginot Line any day as a ground pounder over Karelia. Karelia, I'm afraid to get near Karelia in an aircraft. Even my jet aircraft, the Attacker FB-1. The Attacker FB-1 scares me. It, honest to God, it scares me. You know, I have 2 1,000-pound bombs. I know it can, if I land within about 5 meters of a target, I will kill it. Easy. But the knowing fact that if I fly within the airspace of Karelia with my attacker, I know I'm walking in with a 70% probably 75 to upwards to 85% chance of being killed after the first pass. That's not with the payload being dropped at all, or with the payload. That's just the first pass. I have that great of a chance of being killed in the air. That's how terrifying it is. You know, sometimes you even get killed before you get to your ordnance being dropped. You know, obviously, you know, there are times I've gotten the ordnance out just as I got shot down, but the thought that you're going to be killed knowingly, because the area of combat is so tiny that the coverage of the radar guided, you know, AAA guns, or radar assisted, you know, obviously we don't want to get false facades here, or false facades. This stuff is quite real. This SPAA, the coverage, you can concentrate 4 guns, 4 to 6 radar AAA guns within a quarter-mile space of each other. A quarter mile. Covering the vast region of the map, the ground forces map. What are you going to do? Do you drop your pay? You know, people are saying, oh, it's funny is, you know, a lot of the people that play the game operate the radar-guided AAA that obviously are completely opposed to the idea that radar-guided AAA is an advantage over anything. They'll tell you that you have to fly faster. That will solve your problem. I call BS. I say you have to fly further and farther away. You need to have your payload be smarter, be guided, be tactical, be of that to remove opposition to your team. Those weapons have been developed for those reasons. Obviously, SAM sights are a little bit more terrifying than a radar-guided AAA gun, but in the case that the game that, and the state that the game is at, radar-guided AAA guns reign supreme in the ground versus air. You know, I'd even say some tanks have the ability to wipe out some of the aircraft. It's pretty insulting. Do I think SAMs should be added? Possibly. I feel like having SAMs added to this game would be a great balance if the aircraft with the proper payloads and smart weapons technology are implemented into the game. You know, I want to say laser-guided bombs, but, you know, guided bombs, GPS-guided bombs. I mean, that's pretty advanced, actually. I think laser-guided is before GPS was developed. But these kind of bombs being developed, you know, TV-guided bombs. Obviously, operator-fed wire, or operator transmit. HARM missiles, you know, anti-radiation missiles. You know, that's the category that falls under. That kind of stuff is what should be what the SAMs would counter. And I think what would that bring is, with that being implemented, SAMs become a new element to the package of defense. You stop having the people that are, you know, obviously 4 kilometers up outside of AAA gun range, you know, that are dropping their bombs from high altitude, or their rockets or missiles, whatever you want to call it, whatever they've got payload wise, you know, smart weapon wise. It encourages them to bring the fight down closer to combat, brings them into the fighting range so they can avoid the missiles the way it should be done, the way it should have been done regarding radar-guided AAA. It should encourage the operators in their aircraft to fly lower and faster than before, to use terrain at all costs to protect themselves while still delivering the payload to the objective. That is what needs to happen regarding air RB for ground RB. think this video has very much covered a lot of stuff and everything. I think this is basically the general air package I'd like to talk about. Just rank 6, you know, we need to see rank 6 aircraft being developed. We need to see the technology for the air-to-air systems worked. We need to see the air-to-ground systems worked. We need to see aircraft with the capacity to do battle at higher speeds. Higher speeds, I think, would greatly improve this game's handling. Radar can barely keep up. I'm not saying they can't keep up, they can keep up. But it's just barely with the fast jets. It's enough that they can, you know, flick their mouse and catch the guy. They'll catch him, you know, if they're lucky. But we need to see positive, intuitive gameplay. None of this, I can see you through a house with my radar gun, I haven't even driven out yet, kind of stuff. You know, blind sighting should be added to the game when it comes to radar. And above that, you know, I think to see SAMs added would greatly improve the ability for aircraft to be encouraged to fight at a lower altitude and higher speed. Something to keep the SAMs on a swivel. Something that would be very tough. I don't think SAMs would be very strong at all if people started flying at low altitude. SAMs would be very strong, however, in the case that people are a mile away, just spawned in, and now the SAM is picking you up on radar and he's about ready to fire his first shot at you. And it comes into the game mechanics. How do you indicate to a player that he's going to be tracked by a missile? Because nothing has been done by this before. You know, obviously in World of Tanks and World of Warships, that's been a basic indication with the games, is you've been spotted. You know, Sixth Sense. You know, detection. I mean, detection's standard within World of Warships, but the concept in War Thunder has been, you will never know you're being shot at until you see the tracers flying either in front of you, behind you, or through you. That's been the case. Missiles are, in the time period that we're relatively talking about, there aren't sensors aboard aircraft that notify you that, you know, a seeker is occurring, or a fast radar contact that's small and going at Mach 4 heading towards you. That's never been experienced before. And I mean, if you kind of watch like the F-100 videos, you know, with the missiles, obviously the missiles are really janky, they're not very accurate to what the missiles should be performing like. I mean, they're highly accurate in the sense that they kill their target. But what I'm getting at is the missiles in their truest form. An observant pilot, in most cases, would be able to see it. See the missile, and, you know, evading the missile wasn't hard at that time period, because missiles obviously were an early thing. That could be a possibility for the ground forces as well. Obviously, it's harder to move at the rate that jets are on the ground. You're not going subsonic, transonic, supersonic. You're not seeing that. That kind of speeds are not on the terms of the ground. Ground forces will see a max speed of at least 80 kph, and that's a handful of vehicles. You can't even say that a handful of those vehicles even exist at high tier. But I think it's a discussion worth having. I mean, the whole debate. I think the last thing we should talk about is the helicopters. Here's my beef with helicopters. Yes, the SAMs will counter them at long range. Yes, it's going to counter. It has the capacity to counter radar guided AAA at long range. Do I want a helicopter to pop out of a forest, probably half a click away, and see an entire tank group hiding behind a house and just absolutely obliterate them, and then completely evade? No, I don't want to see that. My issue for that being is, I think if anyone, I don't want to look at a video right now, but I think if people have played Battlefield Bad Company 2 and they know the whole multiplayer thing, where the enemy, when they get to your base or your spawn, they have all your points captured and they got to your spawn. There's the guy in his helicopter doing a a vortex maneuver around your spawn, and he's holding a perfect, you know, right hand or left hand bank, whatever he feels like doing for the day, where he's maintaining a vortex maneuver where he's got his, like a gunship kind of attitude with his guns and rockets. He's maintaining that maneuver, and he's just gunning everyone that's in that little space in between. That has happened so many times in Battlefield Bad Company 2. Do we really want that? Obviously the control wouldn't be at that level and the speed, but think about it. Say you're in a vehicle like the Chieftain Mark III, and then all of a sudden a Russian helicopter shows up, or heck, we'll even throw in the German version of the Apache, the Tiger, or the Tiger, whatever you want to call it. Could you imagine how frustrating that would be? To see a guy standing right above your spawn when you have to spawn in your Chieftain Mark III because your Chieftain Mark V got destroyed, but you didn't know what was going on at your spawn. And, you know, your team's almost getting completely wiped out, or they're too busy being occupied with the fight, or no one spawned in radar, or SPAA. This guy's gonna lower his automatic cannon and just shred the roof of your vehicle. It's gonna catch you on fire, and there's nothing you can do about it. Obviously, tanks like the Leopard 2K and the KPZ and the MBT-70 would have no problem dealing with this issue because they have a 20mm anti-aircraft gun on their roof. Which in that sense would, you know, I can totally see being a counter to the helicopter problem. But the helicopters don't have to fight right on top of you. I mean, it would be very funny, and they're very capable of doing it. But who's to say that they have to? Who's not to say that they're going to sit behind your spawn, you know? Like on Berlin, you know, the North Spawn, sitting like low behind the river, popping up occasionally just to shoot you. Obviously someone would probably hear it because, you know, the blades are going supersonic, and unless you're like me and you've turned your sound down so you can hear your friends on Discord or TeamSpeak, that can be very frustrating. You know, a guy just sitting there waiting for you to spawn in, you know, would you make the spawn safety be applicable to the airspace? I mean, I think you could. I don't think you, I mean, make it a vertical column, but like a bubble on the ground, you know, produce an umbrella of protection that basically says, you know, don't hang out in this area. I think aircraft, normal traditional prop and jet aircraft would have no issue with that, because they'd only be in the area for less than 5 seconds tops. Maybe 7 seconds if you're talking like Skyraider slow. But, you know, some of these jets are booking it. Some of these fighters are booking it. And frankly, in my opinion, I think that's just something that's going to be a struggle to deal with. A helicopter? What are you going to do as an aircraft? Obviously, aircraft, I mean, in the modern world, there's been an issue. I mean, people might not see this, but sometimes it's harder to shoot helicopters down than it is a regular plane. And when they first mentioned helicopters being added to the game, I'm like, I thought, are we going to see this in Air Realistic? And a lot of the people I was with, they're like, are you stupid? And honest to goodness, I thought, you can get a helicopter to work in Air RB. Have you seen what a slow Skyraider can do to a team of pilots that are trying to jump on it? Sometimes the Skyraider can make the first 5 guys miss, or the first 5 attempts miss before it being brought down. That's plenty of time for fighters to intervene. Plenty of time. What's not to say a helicopter can't do that, because it's going to fly even slower. and it's going to do maneuvers that some of the pilots are not prepared to deal with. You know, a helicopter pilot might just pull back on the stick and, you know, retract himself before a pilot behind him coming in for a high-speed pass is just going to overshoot. I mean, in jet terms, a helicopter could be insane. Hiding in valleys and mountains, you would never know how to deal with them. You would have to completely redevise your approach to counter such an aircraft. I think in an air-realistic sense we could see it get away with it, but the thing is about the helicopters is, why can't we add it to air-realistic? This would be another element for the attackers. The attackers have something that's relatively in their ballpark of engagement. Helicopters won't be able to outrun an attacker. They'll be able to outmaneuver it in some cases. Maybe. Depends on how good of a pilot you are, I guess. But, you know, that's a thought. And guess what happens if it doesn't work in Air RB? You don't fly it. You bring it to the ground forces realm of the fight. My biggest issue with the helicopters, however, is the BR. What do you agree upon? Because obviously we're not letting, you can't let that stuff get near 7.0. It'll eat that stuff up so quick. It just can't be done. Obviously with helicopters being added, I mean, you wouldn't have to say there's a necessary need for smarter weapons to be developed. Obviously you have the auto cannon on some of the helicopters. You know, a free moving turret capable of doing that. You even have free fire, you know, ground missiles, or you could even have additional guns on the sides of the aircraft. There are numerous capabilities and possibilities available to helicopters when it comes to dummy weapons being operated. Although there's nothing dumb about them currently in the game, they are very capable. But I think there's a lot more potential for helicopters for high tiers. I think if we were to put them in, say, see, it would be tough to say. Because once again, you know, there's the whole discussion of what BR is appropriate. You know, the issue then lies in the fact that there's a attacker gap. That's where I want to say the F-102 comes into the picture. Probably as a 9.7 aircraft, if we were to hypothetically put it there, you know. Something that's not smart weapon really oriented except in the ground attack. It has, you know, 20mm Vulcan. But this aircraft would obviously be in the position that could possibly be dealing with the helicopters. But, like I said, this is food for thought. You know, I feel like, you know, a lot of people have had these discussions and all that. I felt like I had enough to talk about these topics. Because I feel like every time there's a discussion, there's something new that's added. You know, that's one of the things I like about European Canadian and Fly Daily. Sometimes when they talk, they bring something completely out of the blue that you would never have thought of. That really adds to the conversation. You know, one of the things I got really irritated the most with, and it's, you know, it was kind of funny. The Orange Doom, back when he did stuff. He came forward with this whole thing of maybe they should add purebred interceptors to the game. And the moment he said that, I started laughing. Because this is easily probably 3 months into the TU4 8.0 crisis. 3 months. Easily 3. To put this in perspective, within about, say, 3 weeks into the TU4 8.0 crisis, NATO, as we knew it in the game, Japan, Britain, the United States, those 3 countries linked up against the Germans and the Russians, because that's what the nations were at the time. Were completely the NATO-oriented, because that's, what we refer to them as, the NATO-oriented branch, Britain, US, Japan, a dedicated team of individuals put it upon themselves to stop the TU4, no matter what the cost. That's something that you never ever see, in my opinion, in any games. You rarely see it, and it's usually, and this is something that's not, this wasn't communicated at all. This was taken upon personally. The team of NATO, the pilots that knew they had the aircraft that were equipped to handle the situation for when it was really needed. The Hawker Hunter pilots, the F-2 Sabre pilots. But one of the greatest things I ever saw was the KI-200 finally had a target that it could shoot down. The KI-200, being a 5-minute fuel fighter, easily could be argued as one of the worst 8.0s in the game for its lack of ability to stay on station long enough to engage its targets. Not to say it can't do it, it can. But you have to be fully committed to your eye. One eye has to be watching that fuel gauge the entire time. And there was nothing those pilots could really do, because the planes that they were supposed to engage, they were an interceptor. They were supposed to deal with bombers. The bombers that they had to fight were going just as fast as they were, but at level flight. And by the time the KI-200 got near that altitude, it was vulnerable and it was out of speed. It was a sitting duck. But the moment the TU4 was moved to 8.0, the moment we see the 8.0 TU4 added, the KI-200 had a purpose. It finally had the plane that it was... it was funny because I looked at it and I'm like, the TU4 obviously is a B-29 copied. That's the true and ultimate fact. Through and through, it's a B-29 copied to the letter, to the molecule. It has been copied. And the KI-200 was designed to shoot B-29s down. The TU-4 is just a cousin in another country. It lined up perfectly for it. And that was one of the good things I saw come out of it. And like I said, regarding the whole NATO thing, these pilots took it upon themselves. When I fly the Hawker Hunter, when I first got it, my mission was simple, straight, clear, and it was immediate. Wipe out as many TU-4s as possible to give the team a chance to fight the game. Because before, the games were over. That's just the hard, cold truth. A battle to be fought with the Tupelo-4. The Tupelo-4 was going to end the match quicker than any fighter could. You saw it amongst people, Canberra pilots, B-57 pilots, even the unarmed Canberra B-57 pilots would make the move at all cost to ram a Tupelo-4. That's how much people were dedicated to stopping the issue. You couldn't ask these people to do that. They took it upon themselves with the initiative to do it. And this wasn't like a communicated thing on the forums. This was, you know, kind of like the whole, I'd say like the, what's the one movie? I think was it Johnny Tremaine or something like that? The Revolutionary War movie. You know, where they have Lexington and Concord. You see the farmers pick up their arms and go right to the fight. That was kind of the initiative people had. The problem was there, they immediately seized the opportunity to do their part to stop it. And that's something I haven't seen quite in the game recently. I just haven't seen it. It's just, that's one of the sad things about this game recently, is just the fact that we haven't seen anything remarkable, you know, controversy or adversity added to the game that players had to overcome. If you look at it today, the TU4 is hardly flown to what it was at the time period. No one will want to fly this aircraft for the simple reason that it has been engraved in every NATO pilot's mind to do whatever at any cost to stop it from reaching its objective. And that, coupled with the fact that it costs 53,000 credits. I mean, I think it went up as high as 69,000 credits at one point. They had to bring it down because no one was flying it anymore. That's how big of a force it was to be countered by NATO. NATO, they almost went to TU4s as much as they probably went to church. That's how crazy it is. You know, I look back at those days just bewildered that, you know, so many people, I mean, like I said, the KI-200s did everything in their possible, and I mean, obviously it was such an issue in big cases too. I mean, that's half the story was NATO. The other half was the Warsaw Pact too. Hated the TU-4. People, you know, got so angry with it, you know, in NATO, you know, they'd even fly their Warsaw Pact nation vehicles just to punish the TU-4. They would fly up in MiG-15s, MiG-17s, other bombers, Il-28s at the time. I don't think the TU-14 was quite added yet. I think it was added just slightly a little bit after. It could be wrong. I can't remember. This was so long ago. They'd fly in these planes, or even the Me-163s. They'd even fly up in these planes and just shoot a bomber down. They hated it just as much as NATO did. There was no chance to fight. No chance to progress. You know, people were literally just sitting there. I mean, I think Slickbeat did a video on it where he sat there with a water bottle banging away at the spacebar because he's got nothing else to do. You know, the guns will defend the plane at all cost. And at the end of the day, as controversial as it was, it screwed the MiGs over at the end of the day with its introduction because they reduced the 23mm effectiveness. Yes, the 23s were extremely effective, but that was the other half of the story for the MiGs when it came to flying. You know, they just got devastated. So I think the moral of the story is, don't be surprised to see an issue in the game that I don't think the War Thunder community can't overcome within the game. I think the other story is also, Gaijin should also look at vehicles that not only, you know, bring gameplay, but gameplay that is progressive and available to those that really want to, you know, use it. I feel like Gaijin is right in some degrees when it comes to saying that Rank 6 is a very terrifying realm for them to encounter. It is a lot safer for them to deal with tanks because tanks don't do anything ridiculous like fire missiles that are guided. I mean, I'm saying like self-guiding missiles, but We're not seeing that kind of stuff with tanks. We're seeing composite armor protection. You know, we're seeing that kind of stuff. We're seeing powerful engines being developed. We're seeing aircraft or tanks that are capable of all new kinds of countermeasures, kinds of weapons, better stability packages, better firing control systems. It's all cumulative in progression. We're seeing better speed, armor, firepower. You know, an incredible trio of things that's been the definition of tank warfare. Aircraft are way more complex than that. Aircraft have stepped beyond the boundary. They don't worry about, I mean, there is armor protection in aircraft. It's not as prominent. Obviously there is, you know, protection for the pilot, you know, different means of, you know, obviously they want to protect the pilot from the aircraft. They'll create ejection seats. You know, obviously these are elements that aren't really gameplay, you know, applicable to, you know, fighting. But you see things like with the Sabres, for example. You know, I just thought of it because this is one thing that I've been arguing for a while as well. The sights on the aircraft, you know, were modified with the radar. They were enhanced so that way they would work with the radar and they would indicate exactly where the shots are going to land and at what range relative to the target, when you're in a firing position, when you're clear to fire. That's how advanced the Sabres were. They could tell you all that information. Obviously that would be a huge disadvantage to the German or the Russians. It'd be catastrophic. The MiGs wouldn't survive a chance, at least in the sim realm. To implement it in a realistic sense or arcade sense, I mean arcade, it kind of does it for you, but it's not exactly as simple, clear cut as what the computer gun sight would have been in the Sabres in the cockpit. But the whole concept, and I think they could even get away with doing that with the same way that they've done SPAA radar. That could even just give you a lead indicator. What good would it do you? But still, it would be a ballpark. It's a discussion worth talking about. That's something that I just don't think we can really escape. Once there is a case before it, how can you ever argue something against it? At least game implementation wise. You know, obviously it's the argument of gameplay, progression. You know, is this still going to be is it still workable to the game's balance system? Can you still, at the end of the day, put man versus man instead of the machine against another machine and its capabilities? Although that is the definition of the Cold War, you know, that can't exactly be the definition of War Thunder, because that is a game. You know, that's one of the big issues. Is also another issue is we never really know the performance of the aircraft versus each other. You know, how realistic relatively they were able to do it. The only cases we can really step forward with are the Vietnam War and the Middle East. You know, those are the two major occurrences where 1960s plus aircraft really were put against each other. You know, I'd love to see aircraft like the Sukhoi 7. I mean, historically, documentary-wise, they talk about the Sukhoi 7 being horrific, but I always admired the idea of an aircraft that was supersonic capable, and it still was able to carry a bomb load. You know, that was, in my opinion, it would be the Thud's opposite if they implemented it. And that's the stuff they need to look at adding. But I don't know. People can discuss this in the comments if they want. I don't know how people will watch it. Likely this will probably get very little discussion, but like I said, I feel like I have to get this off my chest. You know, it's kind of that kind of level of discussion that has to be there. This isn't something to arouse activity on the channel. This is something to talk about. Something to get excited about and something to keep an eye on with a cautious high. So I'm gonna leave us off with that. Thank you all for listening. Hope you guys try to comment. If you do, thank you. Hopefully we can look at doing more discussions, and I don't know, maybe there's something to be discussed regarding tanks, but I think I'm going to leave us off with that. So everyone take care, and I'll see you guys later.